If you're still having to work during lockdown, whether it's in business or at school or voluntary work with a charity, the chances are you'll have had to get to grips with Zoom or Teams or some other form of online meeting software. And even if you haven't had that particular joy, I'm guessing that you'll have heard of it. Now, at its best, it can be a really helpful tool for getting groups of people together while we can't meet face to face. But there is a downside. All that screen time can be tiring, and a full day of online meetings will give rise to what some people are calling Zoom fatigue. Now, part of that is that if the internet connection is a bit wobbly, the voices and the video can lag or judder to a halt even. And even when it's working well, with a screen full of faces all looking directly at you and all the sound just coming out from your computer or tablet speakers, sometimes your brain has to work a little harder than normal to work out which of the people has just started speaking. Now, of course, these are all new problems because the technology simply didn't exist until the last few years. But in our first Bible reading today, we'll hear about someone else many centuries ago who couldn't immediately work out whose voice he was hearing. Our first Bible reading comes from the first book of Samuel, chapter 3, verses 1 to 10. In those days, when the boy Samuel was serving the Lord under the direction of Eli, there were very few messages from the Lord, and visions from him were quite rare. One night Eli, who was now almost blind, was sleeping in his own room. Samuel was sleeping in the sanctuary where the sacred covenant box was. Before dawn, while the lamp was still burning, the Lord called Samuel. He answered, "Yes, sir," and ran to Eli and said, "You called me, and here I am." But Eli answered, "I didn't call you. Go back to bed." So Samuel went back to bed. The Lord called Samuel again. The boy did not know that it was the Lord, because the Lord had never spoken to him before. So he got up, went to Eli and said, "You called me, and here I am." But Eli answered, "My son, I didn't call you. Go back to bed." The Lord called Samuel a third time. He got up, went to Eli and said, "You called me, and here I am." Then Eli realized that it was the Lord who was calling the boy. So he said to him, "Go back to bed, and if he calls you again, say, 'Speak, Lord, your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went back to bed. The Lord came and stood there and called as he had before, "Samuel, Samuel." Samuel answered, "Speak, your servant is listening." If you're getting bogged down in an online meeting, one thing that may help is to check your settings and see if there are any adjustments that you can make on your computer or your tablet to make it easier to follow who's talking or what's being said. In a way, that's the advice that old Eli gives to the boy Samuel in our Bible reading just now. Check your settings so that the next time you hear someone speaking to you, it might lead to a more productive encounter. So if you're finding it hard to work out what God is saying to you, or hard to hear God's voice at all, maybe it's time to check your settings. Is it possible that God is speaking to you in ways that you've overlooked? Is it possible that the situations or the people you've dismissed as not worth bothering with might turn out to be exactly the way that God is speaking to you now? Our second Bible reading tells the story of Nathanael, who became a disciple of Jesus, but who had to check his settings first. The second Bible reading is John chapter 1, verses 43 to 51. The next day Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Come with me." Philip was from Bethsaida, the town where Andrew and Peter lived. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one whom Moses wrote about in the book of the law, and whom the prophets also wrote about. He is Jesus, son of Joseph, from Nazareth." "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" Nathanael asked. "Come and see," answered Philip. When Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him, he said about him, "Here is a real Israelite. There is nothing false in him." Nathanael asked him, "How do you know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you when you were under the fig tree before Philip called you." "Teacher," answered Nathanael, "you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus said, "Do you believe just because I told you I saw you when you were under the fig tree? You will see much greater things than this." And he said to them, "I am telling you the truth. You will see heaven open and God's angels going up and coming down on the Son of Man." Young Samuel instinctively responded to the voice in the night by running to Eli and saying, "Here I am." And after a little while, Eli was able to discern who it was that was really speaking to the boy and to tell him what to do. So also Nathanael needs the influence and persuasion of his friends, those who have already encountered Jesus and discovered that he is someone worth listening to, worth following. These stories of Samuel and of Nathanael remind us of our need for teachers and for friends. And I dare say for each of us, whether we came to faith at a specific moment or whether our faith goes back as far as we can remember, for each of us there will be a particular people of whom we can say, "Well, they helped me to understand, they helped me to believe." And for this we give thanks to God. And because all of us carry on learning and growing, we all still need people like that, people who can speak something of God to us, who can show us things that we didn't quite realise that we knew, and can prompt us to check our settings. So let us continue to make room for that godly encounter with fellow believers, through which we might be brought to encounter God himself, not just on Sundays, but through the week. Speak together, perhaps, and pray together. Of course, the circumstances now are more challenging for that, as we can't gather in person, but we can still take the initiative and keep in touch by phone or even, dare I say it, by online video call. Meanwhile, the stories of Eli and of Philip remind us also that there will be times when each of us can be such a friend and such a teacher. Now, Eli the priest may be elderly and infirm, and the description in the Bible of his impaired vision is perhaps a poetic reflection also on his spiritual condition and the spiritual condition of the nation in which he serves. But even so, he is the one who now guides Samuel towards the truth behind the voice. The old man knows that it is the Lord. And isn't that our calling? Are we ready to put our experience at the disposal of others, to offer a word in season to those who are seeking understanding, not for our sake, but for theirs, not so that we might be magnified, but so that God might be magnified in them? Whilst in Philip, we find the enthusiasm of new discovery, the eagerness to tell his friends that there is good news. And isn't that our calling also? Are we ready to tell our friends of the difference that Jesus has made to our lives? Ready to invite them to meet their doubt with a simple, confident, come and see? Yet there is more, because Philip and Eli, in their different ways, may help to move the encounter along, but it's not within their power to bring about for themselves or for anyone else an encounter with the Lord. Fundamentally, it is not their action, but God's action that drives the story. Jesus speaks a word of knowledge to Nathanael to demonstrate that he, Nathanael, has been seen and perfectly known. And Nathanael bows down before his Lord. And for Samuel, well, Eli has told him what to say, but this time, we're told, it is more than a voice. The Lord has come to him and stands there speaking to him. And what a change both of these encounters signal. Samuel lives at a time when the word of the Lord has been rarely heard and visions rarely seen. But this boy has been set apart, dedicated to God's purposes, and through him God shall speak powerfully to his people. But more than that, in the story of Old Testament Israel, Samuel stands at a threshold. Before him, the people have been led by judges. A part of Samuel's commission, it will be to anoint a king, to inaugurate a new phase in God's purposes, to be led no longer by judges, but by a king. And even though this change will come with a deep and realistic warning of the fallibility of human kingship, human leadership, nevertheless it will serve to herald a greater king and to set the scene for the coming of God's kingdom in fullness in Jesus Christ. A kingdom indeed which Nathanael instinctively proclaims in his sudden and startling change from hardened cynic to guileless follower of Jesus. Rabbi, he says, teacher, you are the Son of God, you are Israel's King. And Jesus promises him that he will see greater things, for he will see at last, as Christ himself is shown as the means by which God brings things seen and unseen into connection, into relationship. God speaks, God acts, and in Jesus Christ we meet with God. So today and every day, let's check our settings. Let's be attentive, looking for God's activity in the world today, and listening for God's word of invitation and commission. The hymn, Speak, O Lord, as we come to you.